Unregistered jet at 30,000 feet. Great, another wannabe hero. The radio crackled from the F-22 squadron as they closed in on the small civilian aircraft cruising silently through the clouds. They activated warning signals preparing to force her to land. But when the woman's voice came through the communications frequency, the entire formation instantly froze. Who was she, and why did just one name over the radio make the entire sky fall silent? From which city are you watching this? Today stay for true stories where quiet legends leave even fighter jets frozen. Captain Lena Falcon Ghost Petrova, 39 years old former Air Force pilot who had earned legendary status with a call sign that still echoed through military aviation circles 10 years ago during a classified operation that officially never happened. Lena had single-handedly saved her entire squadron from certain destruction. The details remained buried in black files, but her call sign, Falcon Ghost, had become whispered legend among those who knew after her military discharge. Lena had restored her personal aircraft, a sleek L-39 Albatross that she used for civilian test flights and cross-country journeys. Flying had always been more than transportation for her. It was meditation freedom. And the only place where the weight of her pass felt manageable at 30,000 feet, she switched off the music, leaving only the steady hum of the engine. This was the only place she felt truly free, separated from the memories and noise of the ground below. A slight smile crossed her lips as she watched the endless expanse of clouds stretch toward the horizon. The sky at this altitude belonged to no one and everyone. No borders, no politics, no expectations, just her. The aircraft and the vast blue that had always understood her better than any person ever could. Suddenly, the radar warning light on her control panel began flashing bright red. Lena frowned, checking her navigation instruments. She had been following her approved flight plan, maintaining standard civilian corridors, but the GPS showed her position overlapping with restricted military airspace, a zone that hadn't been marked on her charts when she filed her flight plan that morning. "Damn bureaucratic updates," she muttered, reaching for her radio to contact air traffic control before she could transmit. Her radar screen lit up with multiple contacts, approaching fast, very fast. 3 blips closing from the northeast at supersonic speeds, military aircraft. By their signature and velocity, her heart rate increased slightly, not from fear, but from the familiar sensation of tactical awareness kicking in through her canopy. She spotted them, 3 F-22 Raptors in perfect formation, their angular stealth profiles cutting through the sky like metallic sharks. Beautiful aircraft. She had to admit the pinnacle of air superiority technology they were coming for her. The lead Raptor positioned itself off her port wing close enough that she could see the pilot's helmet through the canopy, professional intercept formation standard procedure for unidentified aircraft in restricted airspace. Her radio crackled with an incoming transmission on the emergency frequency unidentified civilian aircraft. "This is Viper Flight, United States Air Force. You are in violation of restricted airspace. Acknowledge and comply with instructions immediately." Lena glanced at the F-22 pilots flanking her aircraft. Young, confident flying machines worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime. They had no idea who they were dealing with. She could have responded immediately, explained the navigation error, requested vectors to exit the restricted zone. But something in their tone, that particular blend of arrogance and authority that came with flying the world's most advanced fighter jet, made her pause. Let them play their game for a moment. Let them feel the weight of their superiority. She had been where they were, once young and certain that technology and training made her invincible. Time would teach them, as it had taught her, that the sky humbled everyone eventually. But today she would be the teacher. Lena reached for her radio microphone, but didn't key it yet. Not yet. Let the tension build just a little more. After all, the best lessons were the ones you never saw coming over the radio. A young F-22 pilot's voice crackled with barely concealed amusement. "Looks like Grandma's playing Top Gun today." Lena didn't respond. She simply shook her head slightly, still the same attitude she thought some things never change in military aviation. A different voice, more serious, but equally condescending, came through the emergency frequency unidentified civilian aircraft. This is United States Air Force. Reduce altitude and change heading immediately, or we will use force on the HUD displays of the F-22 pilots targeting brackets had locked onto Lena's L-39. The steady beeping of target acquisition systems filled their cockpits like electronic heartbeats, counting down to engagement. Lieutenant Jake Viper Morrison, the young pilot who had made the grandma comment, keyed his internal comm to his wingman. "Can you believe this? Some weekend warrior thinks she can cruise through restricted airspace like she owns the place. You are probably bought that old trainer at a surplus auction," came the reply from Viper 2. "These civilian pilots watch a few movies and think they're fighter jocks. Watch this." Morrison smirked, switching back to the intercept frequency. "Ma'am, I don't know what Top Gun fantasy you're living out, but this isn't a playground. You're about to learn why amateurs shouldn't play with the big boys." The third pilot, Viper 3, chimed in. "That old albatross probably belongs in a museum. How is she even keeping up at this altitude?" Lena listened to every word, her jaw tightening slightly. She had heard it all before during her early days in the military, when female pilots were novelties during her combat deployments, when male colleagues questioned her abilities during the classified mission that had made her a legend to those who knew the truth. But these young pilots didn't know the truth. They saw only what their limited experience allowed them to see: an aging civilian aircraft flown by someone they assumed was an amateur. They had no idea that the woman they were mocking had more combat hours than their entire squadron combined. No idea that she had pioneered aerial tactics. They were probably still learning in flight school. No idea that their own training manuals contained techniques she had developed in actual combat. The irony was almost amusing. Almost civilian aircraft. Morrison's voice carried a note of impatience. "Now this is your final warning. You have 10 seconds to comply, or we will escort you down the hard way." The targeting systems in all 3 F-22s were locked and ready. Their fingers hovered over weapon release buttons they would never need to pull. But the psychological pressure was unmistakable. Lena looked at the lead Raptor through her canopy. She could see the pilot's helmet, probably some hot shot fresh out of advanced training flying a machine that cost more than most counts' entire defense budgets. She remembered being that young, that certain, that dismissive of anything that didn't fit her narrow definition of air superiority. Only when the tension had reached its absolute peak, when the young pilots were convinced of their complete dominance over this random civilian who had wandered into their domain, did Lena finally reach for her microphone. Her voice, when it came through the radio, carried no fear, no defensiveness, no apology, just calm, professional certainty. "Viper Flight. This is Captain Petrova, call sign, Falcon Ghost." The radio frequency fell into absolute silence. The steady beeping of target acquisition systems suddenly stopped, as if someone had cut the power to every aircraft in the formation. Lieutenant Morrison's confident smirk vanished instantly. His hands trembled slightly on his controls, as the implications of that call sign hit him like a physical blow. "Wait!" did she say? His voice cracked as he keyed his internal calm. "Falcon Ghost, like the Falcon Ghost from the stories." Viper 2's voice was barely a whisper. "That's impossible. Falcon Ghost is a legend. The Ghost saved an entire squadron during Operation, what was it called? Operation Nighthawk." Viper 3 breathed, but that was classified. How do we even know about it? Morrison's flight instructor had told him the story during advanced training, whispered it. Really? Because officially it had never happened. A single pilot, vastly outnumbered, who had used tactics so brilliant and flying so precise that it had redefined what was possible in aerial combat, the pilot who had turned certain defeat into legendary victory. The pilot whose techniques were still taught in advanced flight schools, even though her name was never mentioned in official records. The pilot whose call sign had become synonymous with the impossible, and she was flying that old L-39 Albatross alone at 30,000 feet, like it was just another day in the sky. Morrison's squadron leader's voice came through the command frequency, sharp with authority and something approaching panic. "All Viper units disengage immediately. repeat, disengage, and maintain respectful distance. The three F-22 Raptors moments before, ready to force down what they thought was an amateur pilot, now spread into escort formation with the reverence reserved for dignitaries and legends. No shots fired, no aggressive maneuvers, just one name spoken aloud, and the entire sky had to fall silent because some call signs carry more power than entire squadrons. What holds more weight? A formation of modern fighter jets, or a name whispered with respect across generations? Comment, call sign. If you believe true authority doesn't lie in weapons, but in the person who wields them, the silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds, an eternity in aviation terms. Then Morrison's squadron commander's voice cut through the frequency, sharp with authority, and something close to panic. All Viper units, this is control. Stand down. Immediately repeat. All units stand down and maintain escort formation. Sir? Morrison's voice cracked slightly. Confirm that we're dealing with the actual Falcon Ghost affirmative Viper lead. You are in the presence of a living legend. Act accordingly. Morrison felt his world tilt. Every pilot in the Air Force knew fragments of the Falcon Ghost story passed down through whispers in ready rooms and hushed conversations during advanced training. But the official records were classified so deep that most people assumed it was just another military myth. Control's voice came through. Again, this time addressing Lena directly. Falcon Ghost, this is Grey Rock Control. We apologize for the intercept. Your flight plan update didn't reach our sector in time. You are cleared to continue on your current heading with full honors. Escort negative. Control. Lena's voice was calm, professional. No escort necessary. I can handle myself up here, but Morrison's curiosity had overwhelmed his embarrassment. He switched to a private frequency, one typically used for pilot-to-pilot communication during training exercises. Ma'am, Captain Petrova, this is Lieutenant Morrison. I owe you an apology for my earlier comments. Apology accepted, Lieutenant. We've all been young and stupid at altitude, ma'am. If I may ask, Operation Nighthawk, is it true what they say about what you did? Lena was quiet for a long moment. She rarely spoke about that mission, even to those with clearance to know it had happened, but something in the young pilot's voice, genuine curiosity mixed with newfound respect, made her reconsider. What exactly do they say, Lieutenant? Morrison glanced at his wingmen who had moved into loose formation around them. He knew they were listening on the channel. They say you saved an entire squadron when you were outnumbered 12-1, that you used tactics no one had ever seen before, that you turned a certain massacre into a victory so complete that the enemy never recovered from it. And what else do they say? That you did it flying an aircraft that was already obsolete when the mission started, that you were wounded but stayed in the fight for 40 minutes, that you, Morrison hesitated, that you saved 68 American lives that day. Lena's hands tightened slightly on her controls. The number was correct. She had never forgotten it. 68 pilots and crew members who had gone home to their families because of decisions she had made in the space of 40 terrifying minutes. The details are classified, Lieutenant, but I will tell you this. When you're faced with impossible odds, technology doesn't save you. Training helps, but it's not enough. What saves you is making the enemy fight your fight instead of their fight. Morrison's wingman. Captain Sarah Chen keyed into the conversation. Ma'am, how do you make an enemy fight your fight when they outnumber you 12-1? You make them think they're fighting 12 of you instead of one of them. The simplicity of the statement hung in the air. But Morrison understood the complexity it concealed. He had studied aerial tactics extensively, and what she was describing was theoretically possible but practically suicidal. The Phantom Squadron technique, he breathed. You created false radar signatures to make them think they were facing an entire wing instead of a single aircraft. Among other things, Lena confirmed. But the real lesson isn't about tactics. Lieutenant, it's about understanding that superiority isn't about having the best equipment, it's about having the clearest purpose. Control's voice interrupted their conversation. Falcon Ghost, we're showing 3 additional aircraft requesting permission to join your escort. Seems word has spread about who's in our airspace today through her canopy. Lena could see them approaching 2 F-35 Lightning IIs and what looked like an older F-16 Fighting Falcon pilots from other squadrons, probably veterans who had heard the call sign and wanted to share the sky with a legend. Tell them thanks. But no. Lena replied, "I prefer flying alone." "Ma'am," Morrison said, "with respect, you're not alone up here. Not anymore. It was true without any formal command structure or official orders. The various aircraft had formed something unprecedented, an impromptu honor guard for a pilot whose service had never been publicly acknowledged. The F-22s maintained perfect formation around her L-39. No longer predators, but protectors. The F-35s took flanking positions. Their pilots silent but present. Even the old F-16, probably flown by a pilot old enough to have served during Lena's active years, held station with military precision control. Lena's voice carried a note of emotion. She rarely allowed others to hear. "Inform all aircraft that Falcon Ghost is honored by their escort." "But this isn't necessary, ma'am," came a new voice. Older, gruffer. Probably the F-16 pilot, with all due respect. "It is necessary. Some of us have been waiting 10 years for the chance to fly. With you today might be our only opportunity." Morrison understood what the older pilot meant. Lena was a bridge between eras, between the early days of women in combat aviation and the current generation who took female pilots for granted. Her story was part of military history that existed only in whispers and classified files very well. Lena said finally, "But I set the pace and the altitude, and gentlemen try to keep up." She banked her L-39 into a gentle climb. The obsolete trainer aircraft surrounded by some of the most advanced fighter jets ever built. It should have looked ridiculous. The old aircraft dwarfed by modern technology. Instead, it looked exactly right, the legend at the center where she belonged with the future of military aviation, learning from her presence as they climbed toward 35,000 feet in perfect formation. Morrison realized he was experiencing something that would define the rest of his career. He wasn't just flying with Falcon Ghost. He was flying with history itself. When Lena's L-39 touched down at the civilian airfield, word of the encounter had spread through military channels like wildfire within hours. Her phone buzzed with messages from aviation contacts she hadn't heard from in years. The base commander at Grey Rock Air Force Base personally called with an invitation, "Captain Petrova. It would be an honor to have you address our pilot training program. These young aviators need to hear from someone who's actually been there 2 days later." Lena stood in a briefing room filled with eager faces. Lieutenant Morrison, who had called her grandma, sat in the front row with genuine curiosity replacing his earlier arrogance. "Who can tell me the difference between flying and combat flying?" she asked. Morrison raised his hand. "Ma'am, combat flying is applying training under enemy fire." "Party correct, but training assumes predictable scenarios. Combat throws out the rule book." She gestured to tactical displays. "When I faced 12 aircraft during Operation Nighthawk, none of my training had prepared me for what actually happened." A young female pilot asked, "Ma'am, how did you know which rules to break?" "You don't break rules, Lieutenant. You transcend them. There's a difference between chaos and improvisation. Chaos gets you killed. Improvisation keeps you alive long enough to find solutions." Captain Chen from Morrison's Intercept team asked, "The Phantom Squadron technique, can that be taught?" "The technique can be taught, but the judgment of when to use it comes from understanding that sometimes the impossible is just another word for untested." The session continued with Lena sharing insights that couldn't be found in any manual. These weren't just tactical lessons. They were principles for thinking under pressure, finding opportunity in crisis. As the session ended, Morrison approached nervously. "Ma'am, I wanted to apologize again for my comments during the intercept, Lieutenant. You saw an old aircraft and made assumptions. That's human nature, but remember, in the sky, experience often matters more than technology." Chen joined them. "Ma'am, will you be flying through our airspace again?" "I fly where the sky takes me, Captain, but I suspect our paths will cross again." That evening, the base held an informal gathering. Lena found herself surrounded by 3 generations of military aviators, veterans who remembered her active service current pilots who knew her by reputation, and young trainees learning what her call sign represented. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the base commander, stood to address the group. Ladies and gentlemen, today, we were reminded that legends aren't just stories. Sometimes they're people who share our sky and our dedication to something larger than ourselves. She raised her glass to Falcon Ghost, whose techniques we study, whose principles we follow, and whose example reminds us that the sky belongs to those brave enough to claim it. The toast echoed throughout the room, but Lena noticed something significant: the way younger pilots looked at her. Not with hero worship, but with professional respect. They saw her as what she had always been: a pilot who had faced impossible odds and found a way through. As the evening wound down, Lena stepped outside to look at the stars. The same sky that had witnessed her legendary mission stretched endlessly above, holding secrets and stories that would never be fully told tomorrow. She would fly again, not as Falcon Ghost, the legend, but as Lena Petrova, the pilot carrying forward traditions that would inspire the next generation to reach beyond what seemed possible. The sky remembered everything, and now a new generation would remember too. 6 months later, Lena stood before a graduating class of advanced fighter pilots at the Air Force Academy. Behind her, displayed prominently, hung a photograph of her L-39 Albatross, surrounded by the formation of F-22 Raptors from that day at 30,000 feet. "Who can tell me what makes a call sign legendary?" she asked the eager young faces before her. A confident cadet raised his hand. "Ma'am, exceptional flying skills and combat victories." Lena shook her head. "That's what makes a pilot competent. A legendary call sign comes from something deeper." She walked to the window where they could see modern aircraft on the flight line, F-35s, F-22s, and even a few older trainers like her own L-39. In our modern world, where radar and technology dominate, there are still names that can make entire formations fall silent. Not because of the aircraft they fly, but because of the principles they represent. The room was completely quiet 6 months ago. I was dismissed as grandma playing Top Gun by pilots flying machines worth more than most counts' defense budgets. But when I spoke my call sign, those same pilots became honor guards. She turned back to face them. A call sign isn't just identification, it's reputation, condensed into 2 words. It's every decision you've made, every risk you've taken, every person you've saved, distilled into something that defines you forever. A female cadet in the back row asked, "Ma'am, how do we earn a call sign that commands that kind of respect?" "You don't earn it by trying to earn it," Lena replied. "You earn it by forgetting it exists and focusing on the mission, by choosing principles over convenience, courage over comfort." She gestured to the photograph behind her that day. "Those F-22 pilots didn't salute my aircraft. They saluted what my call sign represented: the willingness to face impossible odds when lives depended on it." As the ceremony concluded, a young lieutenant approached her. "Ma'am, do you think call signs will still matter when everything becomes automated, when AI flies the missions?" Lena considered the question carefully. "Lieutenant, technology changes, aircraft evolve, but the sky will always need pilots who understand that sometimes the most advanced computer in any aircraft is the human heart." That evening, Lena climbed into her L-39 for the flight home. As she taxied past rows of modern fighters, she spoke quietly into her radio tower. "This is Falcon Ghost, requesting clearance for departure." "Falcon Ghost, you are cleared for takeoff. Safe skies, ma'am." As she lifted off into the sunset, Lena reflected on the truth she had learned over decades of flying. Legends aren't created by the aircraft you fly or the technology you master. They're created by the choices you make when everything depends on getting it right. The sky remembered everything. Every brave decision, every impossible mission, every moment when someone chose to be more than their equipment suggested they could be. "The skies may change," she said to herself as she climbed toward the stars. "The legends never do. Some call signs fade with time, others become eternal. whispered with respect across generations of aviators who understand that true authority comes not from rank or technology, but from the courage to be worthy of the name you carry. Subscribe Ironheart Stories if you believe quiet legacies still own the skies and always